Hello and welcome back to GCSE History lessons. In this lesson, we will look at the Cuban Revolution and the reaction of the USA. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain the causes of the Cuban Revolution and understand the response of the USA to this event. You will remember from previous lessons that the USA and USSR had been locked in an arms race since the mid-1940s. By the late 1950s, the arms race led to the development of atomic and hydrogen bombs on both sides, as well as intercontinental ballistic missiles, which could launch these weapons across vast distances. Advances in rocket technology also led to a space race between the rival powers, with the USSR launching the first satellite, animal, and person into space before the USA could. The USA during the 1960s began using satellites to capture intelligence after their U-2 spy planes were discovered in the embarrassing event before the 1960 Paris summit. Also relevant to this lesson, you should remember that President Eisenhower wished to save on military spending in the 1950s. He relied on the strategy of massive retaliation, whereby any act of aggression on the US or its allies would be met with a nuclear response. When Kennedy took over from Eisenhower in 1961, he continued this strategy. You will also remember that the USA feared communism and socialism, which it believed the USSR was spreading throughout the globe. The fall of one country after another to the ideology of communism in Europe and Asia became known as the domino effect, and the USA went to great pains in the 1950s and 60s to eliminate socialist and communist leaders in the Americas, fearing one communist government there would cause others to fall to communism like dominoes. So, keeping this in mind, let's examine the events in Cuba in the late 50s. Cuba is a Caribbean island just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, and ever since the USA took over Spain as the most powerful nation in the region in 1898, Cuba had been an economic colony of America. The US controlled Cuba's economy and ensured the leader in power was always under the thumb of the USA. In 1959, the USA refined more than one-third of Cuba's sugarcane, the main crop on which the island's economy depended. The USA also took 3/4 of the country's exports and supplied 2/3 of its imports. Unlike in other Latin American countries, the Catholic Church also wasn't as powerful as a social glue, therefore making ideas of social class stronger in Cuban society than others in the region. On January 1st, 1959, a local guerrilla leader named Fidel Castro came to power and removed the pro-US capitalist military government of Batista. Castro had the support of the middle class and the rural and urban working class in the country, and didn't immediately intend to set up a communist government. But being anti-American meant being pro-Soviet, and with an agreement with Moscow, Russia would buy 1/6 of Cuban sugar, as well as the need to secure popularity from vital communist factions in his government. Cuba shifted towards communism. Castro nationalized the country's sugar industry and redistributed large properties, including $1 billion of American direct investment, and gave the Soviets a base just 8 minutes flight from Florida. The US was humiliated and feared both a Soviet attack and the expansion of communism into other parts of Central and South America. Today, the Iron Curtain is 90 miles off the coast of the United States, Kennedy announced. During the final months of Eisenhower's presidency, he and the CIA drew up plans for an invasion of Cuba to overthrow Castro and return a capitalist puppet to government. In 1961, Kennedy inherited these plans. Kennedy was young and eager to prove that he could stand up to experienced Khrushchev. While Eisenhower had resisted calls to place nuclear missiles close to Russia, Kennedy decided to move 15 Jupiter nukes to Turkey in April 1962. From Khrushchev's point of view, the Cuban Revolution was a massive opportunity and bargaining chip in his fight to get Western troops out of Berlin, and believed that if he had to tolerate US missiles close to Russia, the US would have to do the same. Placing missiles on Cuba would also deter the USA from invading and overthrowing Castro. Castro wanted the deployment of Soviet missiles to be a public display, but Khrushchev decided to do it secretly, probably intending to reveal it once the missiles were already there. The first major blunder of the Cuban crisis was Kennedy's decision to carry out the plans to overthrow Castro. These plans were based on successful strategies used earlier against leaders in Guatemala, where the USA used spies and subversion to remove leaders without going to war. Operation Mongoose was launched on April 16, 1961. The plan was to send 1,400 Cuban exiles back to Cuba to take over key positions, at which point uprisings would erupt elsewhere in the country and Castro would be overthrown. In fact, the exiles who landed in the Bay of Pigs on April 16th were quickly surrounded and the uprisings failed to materialize. Kennedy was caught red-handed trying to invade Cuba. In February of the following year, 1962, Cuba was expelled from the Organization of American States, which then put an economic embargo on Cuba. During the spring and summer of 1962, the US conducted highly publicized military exercises close to Cuba, and multiple attempts to kill or remove Castro, including one mock amphibious assault to remove a dictator called Ortczak, which was just Castro spelled backwards. The Cubans and Russians believed the USA might invade Cuba soon. So leading up to the Cuban crisis, we can see that the Communist Revolution brought the Soviet Union and the ideology of communism to the USA's doorstep. Kennedy's reaction, the Bay of Pigs invasion, was a failure and a humiliation, pushing Cuba further into the Soviet sphere and confirming the need for missiles on the island to deter any full-scale invasion. It's also important to understand that in 1961, Kennedy didn't have any reputation to make him a credible negotiator against Khrushchev, unlike Eisenhower, who was an experienced military general and World War II veteran. When Kennedy met Khrushchev for the first time at the summit in Vienna in June 1961, Khrushchev was threatening about Berlin and Cuba, saying to Kennedy, "I want peace, but if you want war, that's your problem." On the back of this and the Bay of Pigs incident, Kennedy said, "I've got a terrible problem. If he thinks I'm inexperienced and have no guts, until we remove those ideas, we won't get anywhere with him. We have to act." So, to summarize what we've learned today, the Cuban Revolution of January 1960 resulted in a communist regime 90 miles off the US coast. The USA tried desperately to overthrow or kill Castro and used military exercises to pressure and scare the Cubans. Khrushchev decided to put missiles on Cuba to give himself a stronger bargaining position regarding the situation in Berlin and to even the playing field after US missiles were stationed in Turkey. The Bay of Pigs invasion on April 16, 1961, in which 1,400 Cuban exiles were sent to reclaim the island and join popular uprisings there, resulted in complete failure and humiliation for Kennedy. Kennedy was further humiliated when Khrushchev used tough negotiation strategies against him in Vienna in June 1961. Kennedy felt that he needed to take a stand against Khrushchev to be taken seriously. Next lesson, we'll look at the events and consequences of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on GCSE History Lessons.